All right, today we're going to get into something pretty fascinating, a critical FAA safety directive. And it's all about a piece of equipment we all use, probably without even thinking about it, the seatbelt buckle. This is a story about how one tiny, flawed little screw can trigger a massive industry-wide response, all to keep us safe up there.
Yeah, that's a pretty chilling thought, right? The one thing that's supposed to save you, the one thing you are required to use for your own protection in an emergency, what if that's the very thing that fails? That question, right there, is the absolute heart of the directive we're going to unpack today.
Okay, so Section 1, the flaw in the buckle. And this whole thing doesn't start with some big dramatic incident. No, it all begins with a tiny, almost invisible manufacturing defect.
You know that sound, that click? It's like the official start of any flight, right? It's that sound that kind of makes you feel secure, like, okay, we're ready to go. But it turns out that behind that satisfying click, a potentially serious manufacturing defect was just hiding, right there in thousands of aircraft seats. So the component at the very center of all this is the Pacific Scientific Rotary buckle. And look, this isn't some obscure, weird part. This is a super common model. Chances are you've clicked one of these yourself. They're installed on a huge range of commercial and business jets. So how does this go so wrong? Well, it's this chain of failure, and it's pretty scary when you break it down. It all starts with a defect in the buckle's internal screws that nobody can see. Then, under the stress of an emergency, exactly when you need it most, those screws could just snap. And once that happens, the whole buckle is compromised. This leads to two, catastrophic possibilities. Either the buckle fails to hold you in place, or, just as bad, it fails to let you out during an emergency evacuation. Now, with a risk that serious, you can bet the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, had to step in. And they didn't just send out a memo. No, they came in with a formal, legally binding mandate. And to really get how serious this is, you gotta understand what an Airworthiness Directive, or an AD, actually is. This is not a suggestion. It's not a, hey, you should probably look at this. It's a legally enforceable rule. When the FAA issues an AD, it means compliance is 100% mandatory to fix what they've officially called an unsafe condition. And this is the one right here. Every AD gets its own unique number, almost like a case file. And this one is officially known as AD 2025-16-09. This shows you it's not some vague warning, it's a precise order aimed at a very specific problem. And get this, the directive was issued and became effective on the exact same day, September 22nd. That effective immediately part, that tells you everything you need to know about how seriously the FAA was taking this potential risk. There was no grace period. So what exactly was the fix? What did the airlines actually have to do? Well, the FAA laid out a very precise set of actions. The process they laid out was super clear step by step. First, operators have to inspect every single one of the affected buckle screws. Then, depending on what they find, they've got a few options. They can re-identify the buckle as safe, they can replace just the faulty screws, or if needed, they can replace the entire buckle assembly. And here's an interesting part. They also have the option to just block off that seat, prohibit its use until it's compliant. That makes sure no passenger is ever sitting in a seat with a potential risk. But the directive wasn't just about fixing the current problem. It was also about preventing it in the future. And this part is crucial. As of that September 22nd date, it became completely illegal to install any more of these potentially affected buckles on any aircraft. Period. That stops the problem from spreading any further. Now, a directive like this, it doesn't just stay in the maintenance hangar. Oh no. It sends ripples through absolutely every single department of an airline. Just look at how this fans out. The safety department, of course, is managing the risk and reporting back to the FAA. But then you have operations, and they're dealing with unscheduled maintenance, planes being pulled out of service, maybe even unavailable seats. The financial team, they're running the numbers on the cost of inspection, all the new parts, the labor. Even the leasing teams have to get involved, assessing how this impacts their fleet and updating agreements. It really takes a full company-wide effort to handle this. So think about that. It all comes down to this. One single defective screw forces this incredibly complex, coordinated response that involves pretty much everyone, from the engineers on the ground all the way up to the C-suite. All right, so let's bring this all together and look at the big picture here. This isn't just some story from the past. This is an active, ongoing safety mission. The clock literally started ticking the second that directive was issued. So right now, as we speak, airlines all over the world are doing these inspections, they're carrying out these replacements. This is safety management happening in real time. At the end of the day, it really all boils down to this. This isn't optional. It's not a nice to have, it is a mandatory action. The entire goal here is to make sure that a fundamental piece of safety equipment does exactly what it's supposed to do, every single time. And this whole situation is such a perfect reminder of a fundamental truth in aviation. The incredible macro-level safety record that we all rely on, it is built entirely on micro-level perfection. I mean, we're talking right down to the quality of one tiny little screw. And that kind of leaves you with a final thought for your next flight, doesn't it? If one single screw can command this much attention, this much coordinated effort, just imagine the thousands of other invisible details, all the checks, all the systems that are working in perfect harmony to keep you safe from the moment you leave the gate to the moment you arrive. What else is going on that we never ever see?